There are a lot of questions about the upcoming Blue Jackets season, but for me, the big one is regression. We're going to talk about that and a couple other things on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. And we're going to talk about the big questions that we have for the upcoming season today, right? We've floated around a bunch of them in the off season, but I wanted to really focus on kind of the big three for me. So what we're going to talk about today is this goaltending good enough? We're going to talk about, are the youth and the young players all going to get better this season? But we also have to talk about the big one, the big question for me, which we're going to do last, regression. Are the young players going to regress? Are the players that overachieved last season going to regress? Like, the team overachieved last season, I think it's fair to say, and we're going to kind of get into a little bit of advanced stats. Nothing too crazy because, you know me, I know just enough to make me dangerous and very little beyond that. But that's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to talk about the goaltending first because I do think that's the most, obvious issue to have, right? The defense is more or less the same as it was last season. I'm not saying that the defense is not question worthy. The forwards were excellent last season, and I suspect some of them will probably get better. Some of them will probably regress. It'll probably, come out in the wash. The goaltending is going to be interesting. Elvis struggled last season, was in and out of the lineup, has, struggled with injuries and illness and fatigue and, probably a non-zero amount of trauma, considering, he's probably still dealing with the death of a very good friend from a couple of years ago, and another friend died last summer. That stuff affects you, right? So, there is a certain amount of grace that I'm willing to extend to Elvis as to where his game went, right? Because I do think that stuff will screw you up. However, I think he was massively overused last season, and I think that his game suffered for it. And you can tell, right? Elvis was just so inconsistent last season that it makes me wary of just kind of repeating it and hoping that you're going to get good Elvis more than you're going to get bad Elvis, right? I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but when I talked to Jeff Svoboda about this a couple of months ago, he was like, a third of Elvis's games he allowed under 2 goals, and then half of his games he allowed over 6 goals, so you really get feast or famine with Elvis. They moved on from Daniil Tarasov, which we'll see what happens there, because again, non-zero chance that he bounces back in Florida and is a great goalie for them, refines his game, etc. I'm not gonna sit here and say that we should have kept him, because I think that he'd kind of run his course in Columbus. He'd lost the trust of a lot of the coaching staff, I think, and they weren't gonna re-sign him. Even if they didn't trade him, he was gonna go, right? So Tarasov, not an issue. We'll deal with him when we play him in Florida, and he inevitably shuts the team out twice in 3 games, whatever. But obviously, coming in to replace him, Jack Reeves, who was a huge breath of fresh air at the end of the season. Obviously, Elvis was injured, I believe concussed, to finish the season, and they brought Jack Reeves up and played him in 6 straight games, including a back-to-back situation. He played Saturday afternoon in Columbus and then played Sunday evening in Washington, won both games. Played, I believe, 3 games in 4 nights, if you include the fact that he played a game in Cleveland, drove to Columbus and played a game the following night. Just a huge workload for a young goalie that I think says probably less about him and more about the fact that they just didn't trust Danil Tarasov to like open the bench door, quite frankly. Like Jet Greaves was great for this team. Very, very small sample size. I've talked about that a lot this offseason. Like, there is a very real possibility that Jet Greaves is the guy this season. That sample size of his NHL games is just so small, right? He played 11 games this season. Now, in those 11 games, he allowed 21 goals where he was supposed to allow 35 and a half. So he saved over 14 and a half goals more than he was supposed to. Just a little bit of a refresher in terms of expected goals for people who aren't quite sure what that is. An expected goal is basically how likely a shot is supposed to become a goal, right? So it's a lot of things, right? It's things like where the shot is taken from, what point of the game are we in, who's taking the shot, like all of this stuff, right? Is it coming from a certain area of the ice? Is it a wrist shot or a slap shot or a one-timer? All of this stuff, they mash it up together and basically get a number that says this has a whatever percentage of being a goal. Some goals are more likely to, some shots are more likely to be goals, some shots are less likely to be goals. That doesn't mean that they're not going to become goals. Like, again, we're going to look at some of the youth in this and the regression, but I think the biggest one for me, if I pull it up, is Dmitry Voronkov actually scored fewer goals than he was expected to. He was supposed to score 25.7 goals. He ended up scoring 23. On the flip side, Kent Johnson scored 24 goals and was supposed to score 14 and a half. So he scored about 10 more goals than he was supposed to based on the quality of his shot. So, it goes both ways, right? Some guys score less, some guys score more than they're supposed to. But we'll talk about that in kind of later segments here. But to get back to Jet Greaves, again, very, very small sample size, but the sample size was so good that I think a lot of people are wondering, is he the guy? He was excellent in Cleveland for 2-3 years, one of the best goalies in the AHL, was rewarded with a ton of accolades, and he was their workhorse. I think the Monsters, that's the biggest loss for the Cleveland Monsters for me this season, I think, is Jet Greaves. You can talk about losing Trey Fix-Wolansky, Mr. Monster, but I think that they can probably replace Fix-Wolansky's scoring a little bit more easily than they can replace Jet Greaves' goaltending, just because there are fewer goaltenders and the good ones are already on teams, right? But the question becomes, is a duo of Elvis and Greaves better than last season's duo of Elvis and Tarasov? And a lot of that is going to come into, are they going to continue to overplay Elvis? And this is something else that I've talked about a lot on this show. So, if you're an everyday, you've heard this probably 17 times by now. But Elvis is a goalie that plays better the less he plays. Some goalies, they need to play more to be better. And I think Danil Tarasov is one of those guys. Danil Tarasov is not a guy that can play rusty. Jonas Korpisalo had the same issue, right? When he was playing a lot of games at once, he was really, really good. Remember, he got named to the All-Star game in his first proper season as a Blue Jackets starter. And then after that, they split it more evenly between him and Merzlikins, and he just kind of fell apart a little bit, right? He hasn't really been able to recreate that, so I do think that there's probably some health issues and stuff in there, but similarly, Tarasov, I think, is a goalie that is, the more he plays, the better he's going to be, and if you play him once every 2 weeks, he's rusty, he's not going to adapt. Looks like Jet Greaves is a kind of guy that as well plays really well the more he plays. I think that there's probably a bunch of different factors in this. I think one is just that you get used to that kind of workload as an AHL goalie. I think the second is the fact that he's still a kid, he's 24 years old. So not a kid, but you know what I mean, right? And he has been consistently good, right? I will be interested to see what his numbers look like if he's not playing 50, 60 games a season, or however many he used to play in the AHL, or he's not playing 6 games in a row. Because I do think he is one of those goalies that is, they succeed when they get into a rhythm, and it's really, really kind of evident to see. He is a goalie that plays better the more he plays. Elvis is a goalie that plays better the less he plays, right? What this likely means is that, on paper, Jet Greaves should get the lion's share of the start. And, I do think like a 50-30 split, give or take. I know there's 82 games in the season, but like 51-31, 50-32, 48-34, whatever. I think that there is there is an argument that could be said that Jet Greaves should get the lion's share of the starts. He plays better the more he plays. Elvis is a goalie that is not particularly durable, is a goalie that struggles a lot with fatigue, struggles a lot with injuries. I'll be interested to see, actually, thinking about that, new strength and conditioning coach. Is he going to be able to work with Elvis? Because again, there was that issue, God, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, because Sergei Bobrovsky's been gone for like 6 years, or coming up on that. But he was getting groin injuries all the time, and worked with a different strength and conditioning coach, and suddenly, the year after that, I believe he wins the Vezina, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say that a new strength and conditioning coach is going to turn Elvis into a Vezina level goaltender, but if he can eliminate the injuries and the fatigue and stuff like that just by changing up some things in his conditioning game, you want league average out of Elvis at this point, right? I think this organization, this fan base would jump for joy if Elvis could have like a 905 save percentage for the entire season, right? So I wonder if there's something there, but that's definitely one of the questions, right? Is this goaltending going to be better this season than it was last season? And last season it was rough. Like, you look again, going back to the stats, in 53 games, Elvis allowed 168 goals where he was supposed to only allow 160. That means that essentially he allowed 5%, he should have allowed 5% fewer goals. That wouldn't have been a massive difference maker, but if you allow 6 fewer goals on, in 1-goal games, then there's potentially 6 points you're going to get, right? If you lose a game 2-1 and that game could have been 1-1 going into overtime, there's a point, right? And 6 extra standings points, that's a playoff spot, baby. Similarly, Daniil Tarasov allowed 5 more goals than he was supposed to in his 20 games. Similar issue, right? If you can allow 1 fewer goal in 5 of your games, and again, potentially turn that from or even if it's a 2-2 game and you don't allow that extra goal in the last 6 seconds of the game, you win that game. Extra regulation win, extra standing point, whatever, right? So there is potentially 11 goals that they shouldn't have allowed. Now, there is something to be said in there about the fact that if there was only 11 goals, to take them back to kind of to allowing as many goals as average, then the defense needs to improve, because they allowed a lot of goals, but they didn't allow so many goals that allowing 11 fewer goals would not have catapulted them up into the upper echelon of the defensive stalwart teams, right? I'm just real quick going to pull up how many goals against they allowed. So they allowed 267 goals. So allowing 11 fewer goals would take them to 256, I believe. That would have put them in between the Islanders and the Rangers. So they would still be, bottom half of the league. They wouldn't suddenly turn into, the Winnipeg Jets, who allowed 190 goals all season. So there's definitely a conversation to be had with defense, but I think because the goaltending is different this year, and we could see, Jet Greaves could run away with the starting role. Elvis could be relegated to backup. It's going to be different. We just don't know what kind of different yet, right? So I think that's why it's a big question for me. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the youth of this team, who succeeded last year, who's looking to take steps forward, all of that stuff. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is great. You can do all kind of things. They've got player props. They've got same-game parlay. You can jump in live as the action unfolds, right? Like if it looks like someone's going to make a massive, stupid comeback, you can jump in and get in on the action. It makes every game just a little bit more exciting, right? Whether you're watching your team, whether you're keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, whether you've got nothing else to do on a Sunday and you just throw the football on the TV, right? It's quick, it's easy, adds a little bit more energy to those game days. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And if that $5 bet wins, you're going to get $300 to spend on whatever you want. FanDuel.com. Welcome back to Locked on Blue Jackets. We are going to talk a little bit about the youth movement of this team because, like, that's the big thing, right? And the question for me is, how much more growing do the young players have to do, right? And the answer in a lot of cases, I think, is a lot, right? Like Adam Fantilli, 20 years old, turns 21 next month, right? You've got Kent Johnson, who is 22. Cole Sillinger, 22 also. Even you guys like Kromachenko is still quite young. He, I believe, just turned 25. Dmitry Voronkov, 24. Like, you've got all of these players. Denton Matejchuk on the back end, right? All of these young players had very good seasons last year. How much better are they going to be this year? And this kind of folds into like the big question about regression, which we're going to get to in a second, right? Obviously the team is going to regress. I think that's a fair assumption to make. If the team as a whole regresses, is the youth improvement enough to kind of make up for that, right? Because if, for example, Zach Werenski does not perform at a Norris level, like his game is not at the Norris Trophy level as like it was last season. Like they're going to have to pick up the slack somewhere else. Is Denton Matejchuk, for example, if Werenski scores 30 fewer points this season, are you going to get those 30 points back from seasons from guys like Dante Fabro, who not really counting in the youth? I think he's 26. Still young, but 25 feels like the cutoff for me for like young players. You can't see my air quotes because they're below the screen, but are you going to get those 30 points from a full season of Dante Fabro? Are you going to get those 30 points from steps forward from Denton Matejchuk, etc.? Right. The good news is that a lot of the Blue Jackets' best players were their young players, right? So I'm not expecting a ton of regression from a lot of the guys that I just mentioned, right? Voronkov, Marchenko, Fantilli, Johnson, Sillinger. I think they're all going to get better. You might see some regression from, guys like Mathieu Olivier, for example. I think Boo Jen is going to be a really interesting case study. Obviously, he didn't play a ton this year. But, you've got Chinikov is a big question mark. Still a young player, but it sounds like he's flying into Columbus for training camp. So it sounds like he's going to be with the team when training camp starts, which I believe is next week or the week after. So that's another option in terms of who's going to be better, right? Are you going to get the Igor Chinikov that you got at the beginning of the season? Or are you going to get the Chinikov that you got at the end of the season, right? Are you going to get the Marchenko that scored 30 goals? Does he have more goals in him? Does Adam Fantilli have more goals in him? Like, basically all of these guys, I don't think have hit their ceiling yet, right? Like, some guys, I think, Sean Monahan is probably about what you're going to get from him in terms of an offense, right? He was supposed to score 18.8 goals last season, and he scored 19. So basically bang on, right? 57 points in 54 games was a really, really solidifying presence for the forwards on this team. Again, is a healthy Boone Jenner going to do anything? Or is he going to, that's another, that's more of a regression than a youth conversation. But like, Dmitry Voronkov, is he going to be better? Is he going to, I don't know what kind of conditioning he's done over the summer. Are we going to see a different Voronkov when he gets back to Columbus later this month, right? Is Kromachenko going to continue to improve? Is Adam Fantilli going to continue to improve, right? Like, tomorrow we're going to do an episode about hot takes, and I think at least 3 people said something insane about Adam Fantilli in terms of what he's going to do this season. You know, does he have 40 goals in him? Does he have? Is he going to be a point a game player this season? Kent Johnson as well, 57 points in 68 games, shot out of a cannon. All of these players improved from this season to last, right? Not that they had bad seasons necessarily. I think Kent Johnson struggled the season before last, but like Kromachenko continues to grow. Adam Fantilli, obviously a fully healthy season for him. He got his rookie season cut short with that injury. You know, I'm expecting all of these players to improve. Did some of them overachieve? Like, yeah, Adam Fantilli scored like 13 more goals than he should have done. Kromachenko scored 11 more goals than he should have done. Like, but I really do think that all of these improvements from these young players who are going to be a year older, a year stronger, a year better, a year more used to the NHL, I do think it's going to outweigh the inevitable 5-on-5 regression, you know, which is great news. If they can figure it out, right? And that's again, that's the question for me is, are they able to, if, for example, they lose a bunch of goals from someone, let's say Kromachenko scores 15 goals this season. It seems unlikely, knock on wood, but like, or say someone goes down with an injury. Is the team, the rest of the team, and the young players specifically, are they good enough to make up for, you know, if they lose 20 goals from somewhere, and like in terms of players that they lost this season, like James Van Riemsdyk had 16 goals. Are they going to be able to get 16 goals from the guys that they replaced him with, right? So we're talking about Charlie Coyle specifically. You know, like Justin Danforth had 9 goals. So there's 25 goals. If they can get 25 goals from, you know, guys like Isaac Lundestrom, guys like Charlie Coyle, like potentially guys like Luca Del Belbaluz if he makes the team, like if the bottom 6 can band together and create the same amount of goals from the players that they lost, then we're laughing, right? And again, we're kind of getting more into regression talk than the youth movement here, but like there's nothing in here is leading me to believe that the young players, and again, like that group of 5 or 6 guys that are on the team right now are under 25, that they're not going to keep getting better. Like, again, I think Kromachenko is probably the closest to hitting his ceiling. But 74 points in 79 games and 31 goals is like, if you're doing that and you're being paid $3 million or whatever Kromachenko is being paid, like that is insane value, you know? And I do think that there is more to give. I think that, you know, I think there's probably, again, Kromachenko should be close to a point per game this season. You would love to see him hit the 35 goal mark, but I don't know that there's 40 goals in Marchenko, but I do think that 30 to 35 every single year is a real possibility for him, which is like extremely not nothing, right? Like if you had a walking 30 goal scorer on your team, you'd be thrilled. So the youth are okay. The youth I'm not worried about. My question is, how much are they going to improve? Because I think the question is not, are they going to improve? The question is, how much are they going to improve? And is that improvement going to outdo what we're going to talk about in a second here, which is the dreaded regression, right? And I am currently, without having seen any training camp or any, you know, preseason or anything like that, like my guess is, yeah, I think so. So we'll take another quick break, and then when we get back, we will talk about the regression and how much of an issue that is going to be for Columbus. Because I do think that is the biggest question on this list is, what is the inevitable regression going to look like? And is it going to sink this team before they've even started? So we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We've talked about the goaltending, which worries us. We've talked about the youth, which excites us. We're going to talk about regression, which is right back to worry. This team overachieved last season, right? Like when I was going through and looking at how many goals each like players scored and how many they were expected to, like it's really only Voronkov and I think Jenna of the main guys scored fewer goals than they were expected to. So Jenna scored 5 goals less than he was expected to. Voronkov scored 2 goals less, almost 3, 25, 2.7. So he should really have scored closer to 25 or 26. And, obviously the conditioning is an issue for him there. He kind of fell off at the end of the season. But every other player that is, notable on this team scored more goals than they were expected to, right? So Marchenko, Werenski, Monahan, but just barely, Fantilli, Johnson, all of these guys, Mathieu Olivier, who scored 18 goals, was only supposed to score 13 and a half, right? So he overachieved. He'll probably regress. But, even if he does regress to, 10 to 15 goals, I feel mostly okay about that, right? Regression is going to hit this team. We're just not sure where. And like I said in the last segment, are the young players improving going to improve enough to hit the regression, right? Is it a possibility that Adam Fantilli only scores 25 goals this year, but manages to bring up that expected goals to kind of be more in line with, okay, they didn't, they took a small step backwards, they didn't overachieve, but they're going to keep getting better. Because again, next season is not going to be the ceiling for guys like Adam Fantilli, for guys like Ken Johnson. These guys are 3-4 years away from hitting their ceiling, I think. Look at Zach Werenski, right? He's kind of been floating around for a while with potential. This season, he's 28-ish, finally hit that ceiling, and I do think that we're not going to see a better Zach Werenski this year than we saw last year, but this is the level that he can play at, right? If you can get a point a game out of Zach Werenski, that's great news, right? If you can get 20 goals out of Zach Werenski, great news, right? So that to me is about where he is in terms of, I don't think he's going to get better, but so many other players in this core have not hit that yet, right? So it's not going to be a case of they're going to hit their ceiling next year and that's what they're going to be. There's still growth in this team. And I was talking to a friend about this, not long before recording this actually. And he talked about he thinks that this team probably takes a small step back next year to take 2 big steps forward the year after that. And that's not unlikely, right? I don't necessarily think it's likely, but there is a world where this team regresses next year, figures out what to add, takes steps forward the year after that, right? This is not a year where they're going to go for the cup. This is, and it's not really a transition year necessarily, but this feels like a year of right, okay, we were good last year. Let's see what we can recreate from that this year, right? And obviously there's a bunch of intangibles at work and no one can ever really know what's going on and blah, blah, blah. How much of last season was kind of fueled by that emotion of playing for Johnny, right? Are they going to have, similar to a kind of a cup hangover, which I feel like is less of a thing these days, but are they going to have kind of an emotional hangover this season from playing for Johnny last season, right? Again, I think it's unlikely, but I do think that if there is regression, I think that some of it might be that they put a lot into last year emotionally, just missed the playoffs, mad about it. Are they going to fuel that anger and bring that into this season, and be like, right, we missed out on the stupid playoffs last year. We're not missing out this year, right? Again, the problem, as I've talked about at length, is that a lot of the teams around them in the standings also got better, right? So that's going to be an issue, right? Is how much better did Montreal get this offseason, and are they going to be able to translate that into, Montreal's kind of in a similar situation of, I think that they overachieved last year. They scored way more than they were supposed to. They got good goaltending, better goaltending than they were supposed to. I do think they improved a lot this offseason, but is that improvement enough to offset the inevitable regression that team is going to get? Because they were kind of brutal defensively last season. Is adding someone like Noah Dobson going to fix that? Is adding in Ivan Demidov for a full season going to offset the fact that, they are a little bit thin up front, So we'll all questions that are for Locked On Canadians and not for me to answer, right? But they're in a similar situation as the Blue Jackets of, can they overcome the regression with the injection of good young players? And I don't know what the answer to that is for Montreal or for Columbus, right? It's going to be a balancing act. I do think that the team is good enough and young enough that I don't know that the regression is going to be as steep as a lot of people expect. It really is going to come down to, for me anyway, can Zach Werenski keep at the level that he played at? Can Sean Monahan keep at the level that he played at? Can the goaltending figure itself out? Can the young players keep improving? And all of that, like, again, I do think that there is way more for a lot of these young players to give than they showed last season. Even the guys that had incredible seasons, like Adam Fantilli, like Kent Johnson, right? But I don't know how hard regression is going to hit. And I don't know what's going to happen with the defense. The defense is it's not my biggest concern necessarily, but it is one that kind of leads to a lot of underlying threads of, like, I think even if the goaltending is better, if the defense is just as bad, then they're probably going to struggle. If the defense regresses, because I think Ivan Provorov had a really good year last year, but that's a contract year. Is he going to keep that up for the frankly insane amount of money he's being paid to do so, right? Is Denton Matejko going to have a sophomore slump? Is Dante Fabro going to continue to be the guy that helps out Werenski, right? Is the bottom pairing going to be anything other than an absolute liability every time they're on the ice, right? All of that leads into regression. A little bit about youth as well. Obviously, Denton Matejko in there, but like my biggest question is, can the team's steps forward, is it going to be one step forward, one step back? Is it going to be 2 forward, 1 back? Is it going to be 1 forward, 2 back, right? In terms of step forward being youth, step backwards being regression. Are they going to meet in the middle? Are they going to overachieve again? Like, that's a big possibility, right? Like, and in terms of overachievement as well, like, sometimes players just score more than you'd expect, right? Like, looking at expected goals and whatnot, like the players that score a lot of goals, typically they score more goals than you'd expect, right? In terms of the guys that scored the most goals this season, Leon Draisaitl scored 52 goals this season. He was supposed to score 31.4. William Nylander, 45 goals this season, supposed to score 31.2. Ovechkin, 44, supposed to score 31.1. Tage Thompson scored 44 goals and was supposed to score 24 and a half, right? Like, your good goal scorers are going to score more than they're expected to, and that's what makes them good goal scorers, right? So I don't necessarily think that it's overachievement is the word that I used, and I don't necessarily think that that's the right word. But I do think that there might be some regression to the mean, but also good goal scorers just score more than they're supposed to, and that's what makes them good goal scorers, right? Tomorrow, that's all I've got for today. Tomorrow, we are going to talk about hot takes. I asked on Twitter for Columbus hot takes for the next season. I got some real hot takes, and I got some, let's call them warm takes. I haven't had any ice cold takes yet, but and so I'm excited to talk about some kind of hot takes for the Blue Jackets next season. We're going to mix in some predictions. I'm going to talk a little bit about who I think is going to lead the team in scoring, who's going to score the most goals, what the goaltending is going to do. We'll try and figure out, and we'll talk about the over-under, because FanDuel released their over-under projections. And I believe a couple of models, public models, have also released their predictions for where the Blue Jackets are going to end up. And I, shockingly, have beef with Jay Fresh about it. So we'll talk about all of that in tomorrow's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and on Twitter at LO_Blue Jackets. You can find me over at JAKOBFORSTER on Blue Sky. And that's about it. We're going to be returning to 5 days a week next week, which is exciting. So we'll be back Monday through Friday as prospect camps ramp up, and tournaments and preseason and training camp and all of that good stuff. We get hockey in 3 weeks, guys. We're almost there. We made it. Thanks again for listening. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.